Intensity techniques should be used sparingly. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And again, this is something that I've talked about a number of times, and these are things that I occasionally use, some of the intensity techniques, but people will generally notice I'm not a big fan of them, and there are certain ones of them that I never, ever, ever advocate the use of. And it's mainly because I don't think they work, okay? But when we talk about intensity techniques, what do we mean? We mean those old Weider intensity techniques, which means when we do stuff that goes beyond muscle failure or do something besides just straight sets. Examples would be rest pause training, okay? Forced reps, drop sets, okay? All that stuff. So what does that actually mean, okay? Rest pause means you get real close to failure, right? Because once you hit failure, it's not going to work too well. You get real close to muscle failure, maybe one rep away. You rest a few seconds, try to do another rep or two. Rest a few seconds, try to get another rep or two, right? So on and so forth. In fact, when I was young in my early 20s, I think the craziest rest pause set I ever did was some Widowmakers at 315. And I got up to where, like on a squat, Widowmaker squat, at one time I had done 315 for 20 total reps, meaning I did 10 and it was maybe about 11 or 12 rep max at 100% of everything I had. I got up to where I finally did 315 for a Widowmaker set. So I did 10 reps, rested a few seconds, got another couple reps, rested a few seconds, got a rep. And I ended up, I think the last few reps, it was like 10 or 15 second breaks between those reps. But I got to it, racked it, and just laid on the floor. Right? Just laid on the floor. And I remember doing it that day. It was, I remember doing it. It was in a Gold's Gym, actually, down here in Texas. And that's what we mean by rest pause. That's an example. But doing any sets, additional reps beyond failure, where you rest a few seconds, okay? Drop sets, all right, where you immediately just strip weight down. Right? Those usually require, unless you're running a rack on dumbbells or something, that usually requires spotters. But I mean, we messed with stuff like that when I was younger. Some of the guys, we would load, a bar with a bunch of 10-pound plates on a bench and just rep it to failure. And then, again, the guys help you. They strip a plate off, and then you take it all the way down to the empty bar. Okay? Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Works, but it's brutal. Again, extremely effective, but it just destroys you. So again, drop sets like that. Okay, you do drop sets. Those are examples. So that's what we're talking about: rest pause, drop set, forced reps. You'll see that on machines. You'll see it on certain things like I've seen on preacher curls, but definitely machines. You'll see forced reps to where you get to failure, and then the person helps you do a few more reps. Okay, you have a spotter help you rest a couple seconds, do rest pause, and then try to get some more reps on there. Okay, all right. So forced reps like that, or even forced negatives, where they help you lift it and then you lower it. Okay, and you can combine that with some of those other these intensity techniques. All right, here's the problem with them: they just destroy your recovery. You can't handle that much of that stuff. All right, they beat you into the ground. Furthermore, as to how much benefit they add, it's going to be very, very little. Why? Because when we're reaching muscle failure, why are we reaching muscle failure? Well, because your highest threshold muscle fibers just can't handle it anymore, right? They can't handle it anymore. And when that happens, they stop firing. So then people are like, oh, so if you drop the weight down, they'll start firing again. No, they're done. So a lot of times when you're using these intensity techniques, other than maybe the long rest pause on a Widowmaker, right? Because if we're getting with something like that, especially with leg muscles, if you're getting those 10-second breaks between reps, okay, you may be hitting them again. That's why that's a little more effective, okay? But usually we're at a point where mostly it's more intermediate fibers. Those fastest switch fibers are no longer firing. So why is that a big deal for us? Well, because when you're really advanced lifters, those intermediate fibers don't really grow much unless you're on gear, right? But even then, if you are not running large amounts and you haven't increased your doses in a long time, you're still probably back over to mostly the upper threshold motor units. Those muscle fibers involved with those are the ones that are hypertrophying. A drug-free lifter, after you've been training a few years really hard, that's probably the only thing that's growing. So if they're no longer being recruited, we're back to the intermediate fibers, which only have a very small growth potential the longer you've been training. So we come over to the question of how much are we really getting out of this. Now, for an enhanced lifter, they're probably going to get more out of it. Okay, probably going to get more out of it. More novice lifters are going to get more out of it. That's why some of these Widowmakers work so great for the younger lifters still building a base. It works really great. But what I've seen in the data also shows that the longer you've been training, the lower and lower your growth potential becomes for those fibers, and it seems to be really just the further up the chain, the fastest twitch fibers are where the vast majority of the growth is still happening. So if you're not recruiting them, you're not getting a whole lot of extra growth. It could be a small amount. But what happens on the recovery end, especially when you're strong and you have a high work capacity? All right, these sort of sets bury you. You can't handle a whole lot of it, okay? And on top of that, those injury risks start going up, right? Didn't we see that with Dorian Yates? I mean, it worked. But my God, did the man tear a lot of stuff, you know? So there's this to be said. So we come over to, realistically, you could just do nothing but really hard straight sets. Take them to failure, take them very, very close to failure, push hard. And straight sets are generally going to do a better job, right? And particularly as your training volumes start to go up. You know, obviously our heavier work, we don't even always need to get super close to failure. You know, your 1 to 3 rep stuff, not necessarily, because we're doing some of that for a different purpose. But all that stuff in that 5 to 12 type range, that range where we're really in the pursuit of most of that muscle growth, you're just probably going to be a lot better sticking with straight sets for the most part. Just high quality sets that are getting you very close to failure. Why? Because if you're doing those and then you're taking a sufficient break between, the upper threshold muscle fibers, the fastest twitch fibers, those ones can be recruited again easier. And particularly for rotating through some exercises, you're doing 2 or 3 different movements for every muscle, which is, you know, most of us are doing that. Like on average, if we're really, really serious about muscle growth, you're probably doing about 3 exercises, you know, maybe more, but usually at least, 3 exercises. Okay, and if you're getting those to where every set is fresh, every set, because you're going to work different parts of the muscle a little bit to some extent, all right, now we're getting over to where we're getting some really high quality work at that point. And again, you can recover from it. That's the main thing. A lot more high quality work to where you're hitting those upper threshold motor units more total times in a workout. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.